Warning: this video contains animated violence, including scenes of blood, dismemberment, and depictions of people being eaten alive. Viewer discretion is advised. And an extra caution note: for the narrative purposes of this essay, we'll be looking directly at the uncomfortable feelings this violence might create. And we will do this in 3, 2, 1... The Titans. Look at them go. The first time you see them, you realize there's something about them. They're not the most powerful monsters you've seen in fantasy. The series depicts them being defeated quite often. But there's something about the way they move, the way they stare, isn't there? Something unsettling, visceral, a physical revulsion, a fear that doesn't come from your brain, but it seems to sprout from your spine and your guts. That's by design, for the Titans tap into this particular corner of the human psyche, and they do so just to provoke those emotions you're experiencing. And by observing them, by dissecting them, we can also add this visceral tool to our own creative arsenal. So come with me, let's build our own workshop in the Uncanny Valley. Welcome to the Worldbuilding Tower, a series of videos in which I first introduce you to a fantastic piece of world building that exists out there in the world, and from there I extract an exercise that will help creators like me and you improve and tweak our own world building. And at the very end I present my own version of this exercise, not as the right answer, just one example out of infinite that could come out of this set of rules. And a small request for the followers of this channel: I've been feeling quite lonely these days, you know, stuck in this tin box apartment for months, and especially this work here feels very lonely because I do everything. I write, I record, I edit. So if you could interact a bit with me, post this video on Twitter and tag me, send me a little message on the YouTube comments, in whichever way you feel most comfortable with. It would help me feel connected. I've been feeling quite isolated these days, so that would help a lot. Attack on Titan is currently releasing its final season, and it is as brutal as ever. And that made me wonder, why are the Titans so successful in provoking that special revulsion inside of me? As a fantasy enthusiast, from games to books to TV shows, I'm constantly bombarded with noxious creatures and terrible monsters and adversaries incomprehensible to humankind. And yet, very rarely they make me go, yeah, like the Titans do. This is by design. This was a careful choice by the writing team. And if you got the right references, you know exactly where those feelings come from. You probably felt them before when watching a badly animated game, a robot trying to impersonate a human, or even a wax statue that's good, but not good enough. The phenomenon is commonly addressed as the Uncanny Valley. Here's the basic idea. We don't feel much familiarity or natural affinity for things that look really different from people, like a rock or a microchip. But the more human-like characteristics you add, the more familiarity and natural affinity you add to the object. That's why, for example, people tend to feel more affinity towards cats than toasters. And this is very often used narratively, as we grab an otherwise unlikable thing and give it a couple of human characteristics, making it likable. On the other side of the spectrum, we've got full familiarity. You, a human, recognizes another human. A human is the most familiar thing to you because you happen to be one. But do you see this drop here? This is the Uncanny Valley. It is theorized that it exists as an evolutionary mechanism, so we feel revulsed to corpses and people with terribly contagious skin diseases. Such is the way of the Uncanny Valley. If you remove and keep removing human characteristics from something that looks like a human, eventually it becomes unsettling to you. Not neutral, like a rock or a microchip, but something you naturally detest. But it also works the other way around. You grab something that's not human and add enough human characteristics, and suddenly you feel those feelings towards it. This is what the Titans are doing to you. They're not human, that's very clear, but there's something about the way they walk, their expressions, their skins and noses and eyes. There's something about them that makes you think they sweat like us, that they feel the rocks on the floor with their gigantic feet, just like me and you would. You remember your cousin making a gesture just like this Titan. You think that this other Titan kinda has a hair that reminds you of your primary school teacher. Just like that, Titans are firmly placed right in the uncanny valley. Right there where the corpses should be. And if Attack on Titan's writers could use the uncanny valley so intentionally, deliberately, so can we. Let's turn this into a world-building exercise. Alright, let's creep ourselves out. This exercise will be a bit different from the other ones in this channel, because this time around, for this particular skill, I think it's ideal if you don't work with a world building that you created yourself, but you iterate on top of a world building that somebody else created. So our first mission here is to choose a creature, a villain, a monster in a piece of media that you're familiar with, but you're not the author. We want to make that monster less likable. So if you can choose a monster that you believe was not as bad as it could have been, then the exercise becomes even more powerful. There are many ways to make something less likable, but don't forget that we're here seeking the uncanny valley. This is the one skill we want to practice, so keep that graph in mind. As I mentioned before, there are two entrances to the uncanny valley. You're either going to dehumanize a monster that's too human, or you're going to humanize a monster that's too inhuman. Which path should you choose will depend on your monster, but honestly, just reflecting upon this and devising a strategy based on your reflection is a crucial part of this exercise. How does that monster change? Which aspects of that monster are changed? And with that, we go to the last part of this video, which is my take on this exercise. I also encourage you to look on the YouTube comments, because there's a lot of amazing world builders posting their own versions of the exercise, and they're so cool, many times much better than mine. So if you also want to post your world building down there or ask people questions, it's a lovely place to interact. And let's build some unsettling things. I wanted to challenge myself and go a bit away from my usual media references. I mean, I could go Ghibli, but not today. Still, I needed to choose a monster that I was familiar with and that my audience would somewhat know, or at least have heard of. So today, I am going to uncanny the hell out of Ursula, the Little Mermaid's antagonist. Ursula is a well-built character. She has a lot of personality, a unique look, she has her own motivations, and she's powerful in a very Ursula way. You might think that she's an octopus with a lot of human characteristics, so I'd have to add some human bits to her to achieve the uncanny valley. But upon observing her, analyzing her, and checking my emotions towards her, I got to the conclusion that she's way too human, particularly her face, which guides the whole character. And sure, she has her creepy octopus body, bless her, but the viewer's eye is mostly drawn to the face and the hand gestures rather than the tentacle body. So my take here is that we got to dehumanize her, and more specifically, we got to dehumanize those very human expressions of hers, as those are the elements that are really anchoring her to the other side of the valley. Disney's incredible animation gave Ursula all of those inherently human facial expressions, so human that they feel they belong in a theater stage, and theater is a human exclusive activity. You poor, unfortunate soul. Go ahead, make your choice. I'm a very busy woman and I haven't got all day. It won't cost you much, just your voice. So my approach here is to disjoint her facial expressions from what she's saying. She's still going to make deliberate facial movements as if she was trying to express something, but those movements just won't be the movements that a human would choose if they were trying to communicate. Everybody can understand a smile. Everybody can understand a raised eyebrow. Those movements are universal. They don't depend on culture. But the face is very malleable. There are so many movements that we just haven't decoded into any sort of expression. You poor, unfortunate soul. Go ahead. Make your choice. I'm a very busy woman, and I ain't got all day. It won't cost you much, just your voice. My Ursula will have nothing but those undecoded facial movements, and she's gonna give children oh so many nightmares. Before I wrap up this episode, I wanted to show you something really cool that a fan of the channel named John made. Look at that, it's so nice. It reminds me, of course, of the Dark Tower, which is objectively the best tower. Thank you so much, John. That was super nice of you. That's it for today. Thank you so much for your attention. To my patrons, I wanted to remind you that this week's perk of being a patron of this channel is mind reading. So if you started listening to people's thoughts when you're not ready for that, I'm sorry I sent you an email. You might not have gotten it. It will go away in just a couple of days. Thank you so much for your support. You're the best. And that's it, folks. Ciao. See you next time.